The streamers fluttered in the air. Laughter bounced around the hall. But at my seat, something waited. Paper, stiff and folded. A joke wrapped in disrespect. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Russell Granger. I'm 72 years old, and this is what really happened. It was my birthday, my 72nd. Not some trivial number, not one you just slap a balloon on and forget by next Tuesday. In Canton, Ohio, we treat our elders with respect. Or at least, I thought we did. The VFW hall on Maple Street was buzzing. The ceiling tiles sagged with age, water stains ringed the corners, but someone had strung paper banners across them anyway. Red plastic tablecloths clung to fold-out tables, corners taped down with strips of masking tape that had already begun to curl. Streamers dangled low enough to brush the hair of anyone taller than 6 feet. A rented karaoke speaker crackled faintly with tinny birthday music, and on every table sat styrofoam bowls. Coleslaw sweating under fluorescent lights, potato salad turning glossy in its mayonnaise sheen, store-bought rolls already hardening at the edges. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't elegant. But it was the kind of celebration my late wife Clara used to throw. Only this one wasn't hers. She'd been gone 3 years, and every time I glanced at the buffet line, I half expected to see her bustling with a serving spoon in hand, adjusting platters, fussing over the angle of napkin folds. She had a way of turning even the cheapest setup into something that felt intentional. This party, this wasn't hers. This was my son's idea. Evan, 45, tech consultant, a man whose midlife stomach pushed against a novelty shirt that screamed, "World's okayest son." That should have been my first warning. He told me it was a surprise, told me to dress nice, and I did. I wore my Navy sport coat, the one Clara had picked for my retirement dinner from the Postal Service. I polished my shoes until I could see the overhead fluorescence blur against them. I even shaved twice that morning to catch the stubborn white whiskers that always clung to my jawline like defiance. And in the breast pocket, Clara's pocket square. The one she embroidered herself, initials in gold thread. It smelled faintly of cedar from the box where I kept it. A ghost of her hand lingering in every stitch. I showed up expecting warmth. Instead, I got a ticket. Not for a raffle, not for a door prize. A ticket printed in bold Comic Sans, taped to the seat at the head of the room. Reserved for the birthday boy, in the back. In the back, behind the buffet table, near the industrial mop sink where bleach fumes clung to the concrete. It was meant to be a joke, I'm sure. Ha ha. Sit the old man behind the potato salad. The guests laughed. Not all at once, not in unison, but in waves. Little bursts, like popcorn hitting the walls of a tin pot. First a chuckle from the corner, then a smirk near the punch bowl, then louder as Evan raised his phone. "Come on, Dad, don't look so serious," he called out, grin wide, phone angled high. "It's a bit. Lighten up." Lighten up. That phrase has never landed softly in my life. Not from bosses, not from neighbors, and certainly not from my own blood. I reached for the chair. The moment the plastic legs scraped against the concrete floor, the sound tore through the birthday playlist. A squeal, harsh and sharp, like a cheap metal lid dragged off a dented trash can. The laughter stuttered, the air snagged. Not completely, not sincerely, but enough for me to feel the shift. Enough for me to know eyes were on me. Not with kindness, but with the curiosity you give a cracked windshield. A flash popped behind me, then another. I turned just enough to catch a blur of someone recording. For a second I thought, a cousin maybe, some distant relative with a phone addiction. But then I noticed the lanyard. A silver rectangle glinted against her cardigan. Not a cousin, not family. Notary Public, State of Ohio. I didn't let my face change, didn't let the satisfaction tug at the corners of my mouth. Just sat. Hands folded neatly on the paper ticket like it was a dinner napkin. Smiled, nodded. Evan clapped his hands together. "Okay, folks, Let's kick things off with a little trivia about the man of the hour. That was my cue to stop listening. Instead, I watched. I watched who laughed too easily. I watched who avoided my eyes like guilt was contagious. I watched as my daughter-in-law, Cheryl, leaned toward our neighbor from 2 doors down, lips curling into whispers. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The cadence of mockery is universal. Whisper, glance, snort, sip, rinse, repeat. I'd been through this dance before, not at birthdays, but in board meetings where younger men assumed I'd already checked out, at retirement dinners where jokes cut deeper than the cake, even at Clara's memorial, where someone had the gall to check sports scores mid-eulogy. People like Evan had a gift. They could take disrespect, wrap it in shiny paper, and call it entertainment. And today, I let him unwrap it, one crinkle at a time. A balloon popped in the corner. A toddler yelped, startled, but no one turned. Laughter rolled louder, thick and careless. "All right, pop quiz," Evan said, grinning at the crowd. "Who can guess how many stamps Dad collected in his weird little binder thingy?" That line hit hard. Even the caterer giggled, one hand over her mouth. I inhaled slowly, exhaled through my nose. My hand slid into my coat pocket. My fingers brushed the ridges of a small flash drive. Smooth, cold, weighted just enough to remind me it was real. Not yet. Not yet. The party rolled on like a poorly steered shopping cart, wobbling, clanking, careening toward spectacle. Cake arrived, sheet style, Costco. Too much icing smeared into neon borders. Evan made a show of cutting it, knife slicing too wide, frosting collapsing in clumps. "One slice for the king of stamps," he declared, holding the plate high. "Hope he doesn't trade this one for a commemorative envelope." More laughter, more photos. Another round of phones lifted. Someone offered me a plate. I waved it off gently, smile still fixed. And then the woman with the lanyard moved, not toward the food, not toward the kids playing under the table, toward the corner of the hall, where a black leather briefcase sat like a sentinel atop a folded table. She knelt, fingers deft, unclasped the case, slid out her tablet, inserted the flash drive I'd given her a week prior. Click, play. At first no one noticed, but then sound filtered into the hall. Quiet at first, then growing. My son's voice, Evan's voice, unmistakable. "He's just sitting on all that money," the recording said. His laugh followed, casual, unguarded. "Probably forgot he even has half of it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we all get a piece just for showing up and pretending we like the guy." A pause, another chuckle, then Cheryl's name. "Cheryl says just keep him happy until the ink dries. That's the plan." That's the plan. The room didn't stop. It froze. Cheryl's plastic fork clattered against her plate, frosting smearing across the red tablecloth. Someone near the punch bowl gasped, sharp enough to pierce the air. I didn't move, didn't blink, just sipped my water, the ice clinking soft against the glass. Let the silence bloom like a bruise across the hall. Let the footage play. Evan stammered first, his voice cracking louder than the speakers. "What the hell? Who's playing that? Turn it off." He lunged forward, but the notary moved faster. She stood, holding her credentials high. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Is she legal?" Another voice followed, hushed, urgent. "Is this like real? Real?" The screen faded black. The audio clicked silent, but the damage had already rooted itself deep. The hush that lingered wasn't silence. It was shame, thick and fermenting in the open air. I rose slowly. My chair legs scraped again, but this time the sound wasn't met with laughter. Every head turned. I didn't walk to the mop sink. I walked to the front, past the cake, past the cheap balloons, past my son, whose face had flushed so red it bled into his ears. I looked at him. "You said I forgot about the money." Evan opened his mouth, closed it, words stuck in the heat of his throat. "You're right," I said, voice steady. "I did forget about some of it, but not the part that matters." From my inside pocket, I drew out an envelope. Thin, stamped, sealed. I held it high. The flash from a camera struck it, light bouncing like a beacon. And I smiled again. Not the kind they could laugh off this time. The envelope never left my hand. I didn't wave it. I didn't shake it with theatrical flair. I simply held it, upright, still, deliberate, like a flag no one expected me to carry. Its weight wasn't much, ounces at best, but in that moment, it felt heavy enough to tilt the entire room. Evan took a step forward. His shoes scuffed against the concrete floor, a sound sharp as chalk dragged across slate. He stopped himself, one half stride frozen in the air. He knew better. Somewhere in that self-absorbed mind of his, there was still a flicker of recognition, the kind that told him, Dad doesn't do this unless it matters. The notary was already moving, quiet heels, steady rhythm, no rush, no hesitation, a presence that commanded attention not by volume, but by certainty. She reached the head table, set her iPad flat on the linen, and spoke with a voice that cut through the stale air cleaner than any raised shout. The timestamp has been captured, witnessed, recorded, and verified under Ohio's revised code section 147.541. The words landed like gavel strikes. Someone gasped. Probably Cheryl. Her gasp always carried a theatrical edge, like she wanted people to notice her reaction as much as the moment itself. But it didn't matter. That single sentence was enough to shift the room's entire weight. You could almost feel the ground tilt. Laughter rolling back, replaced by a silence that pressed into the skin. I broke the stillness. Paper rustled as I opened the envelope. That sound, so ordinary, so small, sliced the atmosphere open like a zipper, down fabric stretched too tight. I slid the folded document onto the table. Cream-colored paper, thick, watermarked. The kind of paper that doesn't come from your everyday printer. The kind meant for signatures that outlast generations. Evan's voice cracked. Dad, come on. You're making a scene? I didn't look at him right away. I kept my eyes on the paper. I didn't hire a notary. He froze. His mouth twitched, but no words came. Clara did. That name, Clara, rippled across the guests like a stone dropped into still water. Murmurs, confusion. Even those who barely knew her seemed to straighten, as if the gravity of her name demanded posture. I let the pause stretch, then laid the second sheet beside the first. A letter, edges slightly curled, ink softened by time. Clara's unmistakable script, each line written with the same care she once used, addressing Christmas cards or jotting notes in her recipe books. Signed, notarized, dated 7 months before she passed. She didn't want the money, I said quietly, to go to whoever smiled the widest. No one laughed now. She wanted it to go to the one who protected dignity. Hair and mine, the family's. Evan's jaw worked, muscles flexing under his skin. He clenched his fists at his sides, eyes darting left and right, like a boy searching for an ally. You're twisting this, he spat. Am I? I turned toward the notary, giving her a small nod. Would you read the clause? She didn't hesitate. No theatrics. Just steady professionalism. Per the amendment filed with Stark County Clerk's Office, document ID number 2, 02104-7853. The estate's primary benefactor is subject to forfeiture of claim if found publicly ridiculing, humiliating, or otherwise degrading the named parties on record. She lifted her gaze, sweeping it over the hushed faces. That includes today's incident. It was too quiet, too complete. Even the children, the ones who had been bouncing balloons, scraping chairs, giggling under tables, had gone still, sensing the weight even if they couldn't name it. From near the center row, a boy, 12, maybe, leaned toward his mother and whispered, "What does forfeiture mean?" His voice cracked with curiosity, slicing through the silence. Cheryl broke it next. She shoved back her chair, wood legs screeching on the floor, Her face blotched red, hands gesturing wildly. "You've got to be kidding me," she snapped. "This was a joke, Russell. A joke. You're going to rewrite your whole life over a joke?" I tilted my head, eyes steady. "No," I said. "I rewrote the will." The sound that followed wasn't a gasp in unison. It was layered, real, honest, a ripple of disbelief moving across the hall. Cheryl's chest heaved, her voice pitched high, shrill. "We've been here for you. We planned this whole thing. We brought everyone together." "And you made me sit by a mop sink," I replied softly. "On my birthday." I turned to Evan. His face was caught between rage and panic, like he couldn't decide which mask would serve him better. "Your mother once told me, watch how they treat you when they think you're irrelevant." I let the words hang, each syllable deliberate. She was right. Behind me, I heard the shuffling of purses being gathered, jackets lifted from chair backs, guests muttering excuses, slipping toward the exit. They wanted distance, from conflict, from shame, from choosing sides. But not everyone retreated. One figure stepped closer. My niece, Molly, mid-30s, quiet as a sparrow, always watching from the edges of gatherings. She moved gently, not with the urgency of defense, but with the gravity of truth-seeking. She stopped by the table, her gaze fixed on the document spread before me. "Uncle Russ," she said, voice hushed, "is this real?" I looked at her, and for the first time that evening I let my face soften. "It's real. And you, Molly, were one of 3 people Clara trusted." Evan's laugh came sharp, brittle. "Molly, are you serious?" He waved a hand, dismissive. "She's not even—" "She visited Clara in hospice," I cut him off. "When none of you could find time between brunch and vacation. She remembered her birthday. She mailed letters. She listened." Molly's eyes glistened, her hand covering her mouth. "I didn't do it for money," she whispered. "That's exactly why you deserve it." Her tears trembled at the corners of her eyes, but she nodded. The notary stepped forward once more, voice level. "Mr. Granger, would you like to officially hand off the evidence drive?" I reached into my pocket. The flash drive felt cool, its edges sharp against my palm. I set it gently atop the amended will, the sound of plastic on paper small but final. "Deliver it Monday morning," I told her. "Probate can take it from there." Someone clapped, just once. Not applause, not celebration. A slow, deliberate acknowledgement. Another voice murmured, almost reverent, "He did it!" The room fractured after that. People filed out in clusters, whispers chasing them to the door. Cheryl leaned close to Evan, hissing words sharp enough to sting, even without hearing them. But I didn't care to parse her syllables anymore. The only one who stayed near was Molly. "Would you help me carry these papers to the car?" I asked. "Of course," she said, gathering the documents with careful hands. She tucked the envelope beneath her arm and picked up the guest book someone had abandoned on the table. We walked together out into the crisp Ohio evening. The air cut cold against my cheeks, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant wood smoke. I glanced back once, through the glass doors of the VFW hall. Evan hadn't moved, still standing by the cake, still waiting for a punchline that would never come, still clutching a party that didn't belong to him anymore. I didn't say goodbye. I'd already said everything I needed to, without raising my voice, without throwing a fit, without demanding applause. And yet, I had one. I'd always had one. By Sunday evening, the whispers had spilled from the hall to the streets of Canton. Midwest towns like ours don't hold secrets very long, not when those secrets are wrapped in family drama, notarized in public, and spiced with betrayal juicy enough to season a year's worth of gossip. You could hear it at the grocery store checkout line, mutters behind coupons, receipts left dangling while clerks leaned closer to hear the latest. You could hear it at the church steps, murmurs between handshakes after service. Even at the gas station with the pump handle rattling, someone would whisper, "Did you hear about the Grangers?" By Monday morning, 3 of Evan's so-called close friends had already called me, not to apologize, of course, not to stand with me. No, their voices dripped with false concern like honey masking vinegar. Russell, we just wanted to clarify what we saw. Clarify my foot. They wanted one thing, to know if the will amendment was real. And it was. The clerk at Stark County Probate had already processed the digital filing. I knew because I checked myself. Time-stamped, uploaded, public record, irreversible. Clara's signature sat there in black ink, steady as her hand had always been, the notary's seal pressed crisp in the corner. My flash drive video, transferred, renamed, locked in their database under a cold title. Beneficiary, violation clause. Executor, trigger. That title alone was enough to freeze Evan's future in place. A steel trap sprung shut. And the best part? I hadn't even opened the second envelope yet. Because Clara wasn't just wise, she was thorough. Back when she first amended the trust, she made me promise not to tell a soul. Her eyes had been soft but firm in that hospital room, the faint beep of monitors behind her, the smell of antiseptic heavy in the air. Russ, she whispered, it'll only work if the rot reveals itself naturally. I hadn't understood, not then. I wanted to fight, to prepare, to shield her from pain. But she shook her head, frail fingers squeezing mine. Let them show themselves, she said. Then the world will see what I already know. And now I could see it too, clear as a blueprint. Mockery, forfeiture, silence, strength. And it was time for step 2. That Monday morning, the sky was pale gray, the kind that pressed low over rooftops like a lid. Frost still clung to the grass, brittle enough to crunch beneath my shoes. I drove down Lincoln Way, past shuttered storefronts and the coffee shop that always smelled like burnt beans, until I reached the law office, painted green shutters, an American flag snapping faintly in the chill breeze, gold letters on glass, Brenner and Clark, estate specialists. I didn't bring a lawyer with me. I didn't need to. I was holding one. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet. A coat rack leaned in the corner, half full, the kind of place where clients always left umbrellas behind. The receptionist blinked when I gave my name. Her surprise was polite, but unmistakable. Mr. Granger, she said softly, we've been expecting you. That phrase, it felt heavier than it should have, like a script Clara herself had written into the air long before I arrived. Inside, the lawyer, Marlene Clark, stood waiting. Mid-50s, neat bob, glasses that caught the morning light. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. You're here to transfer the roll? She asked. I am? She nodded once, slid a single sheet of paper toward me. No excess pages, no thick packet, just 3 sentences and a signature line. Executor duties. Revoked from Evan Granger. Executor duties granted to Molly E. Hartford. That was it. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake, not once. The ink flowed dark and sure across the page, sealing what had already been decided. The signature dried before Marlene pressed her seal into the margin, firm and final. She slipped the paper into a fresh envelope and placed it into my hand. Once she opens this, Marlene said, her tone even, she holds full administrative authority, including disbursement permissions. That's exactly what Clara wanted. I left with the envelope tucked in my coat pocket, the same pocket that once carried my retirement pin, my wedding vows folded neat, the small photograph of Clara I'd kept for decades. Now it held something heavier than all of them combined, the beginning of a reckoning. Molly met me that afternoon at the diner across from the courthouse. It was the kind of place that hadn't updated its decor since 1978. Red vinyl booths cracked at the seams, a jukebox still bolted to the wall, humming faintly even when no one fed it coins. The air smelled like burnt toast and weak coffee, a scent I'd always associated with honesty. She was already waiting when I arrived, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as I slid into the booth across from her. Her voice was small, uncertain. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on the table. "You were there when no one else was. You never asked for anything. That's the kind of person who should hold the pen." Her eyes widened when I pulled the envelope from my coat and laid it between us. She stared at it for a long moment. Her fingers hovered, hesitant. Then, with a shaky breath, she broke the seal. The paper whispered as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned line after line, lips moving silently. Then she looked up. "This means—" "It means," I said, "you're the one who decides what happens next." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clink of plates, the murmur of other booths filled the silence. The jukebox played some forgotten 70s tune. Guitar twanged, filling the gaps our words couldn't. Then I saw it, her shoulders straightening, her jaw setting. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it, but I want to do it right. That's why Clara chose you." The next 24 hours moved quick. Too quick. Molly contacted Brenner and Clark to formalize the filing. By Tuesday, the paperwork was locked in. That afternoon, I got a call from the bank. My account activity required secondary authorization now. Transfers, withdrawals, large disbursements, all frozen until Molly's approval. That was the moment I realized I wasn't the executor anymore either. That power, the authority to decide, to sign, to release, no longer rested with me. It rested with someone who had never mocked a soul in her life. It felt right. By Wednesday evening, the fallout arrived. Evan showed up at my house without calling. The pounding on the door rattled the glass, louder than necessary. I opened it anyway. He barged past me, shoes tracking mud across Clara's old rug. "What the hell, Dad?" he barked. "You gave everything to her?" I didn't answer right away. I let him pace, let him sputter. His anger needed room to burn itself thin. "This is insane," he shouted. "You can't just strip me out of everything because of one bad joke." I met his eyes then. "It wasn't one joke." "Oh, give me a break. It was every skipped call." I cut him off, voice steady. "Every accidental forward of private text. Every time you laughed a little too loud at my expense and thought it wouldn't matter." That stopped him. For the first time, he flinched. "Clara saw it," I continued, "and now I finally do too." His anger drained, leaving something smaller behind. He slumped into a chair, shoulders sagging. "So what now?" he muttered. "I'm cut off?" I reached into my desk and pulled out a third document, smaller, folded neat, sealed with a silver sticker. I placed it in front of him. "That depends," I said. He looked at it warily. "On what?" "On whether you want to be better or just look better." He stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. His jaw flexed, his eyes darted, but his hand never moved. I didn't force it. Instead, I rose, walked him to the door. "You're my son, Evan," I said quietly, "but that doesn't mean you're entitled to disrespect." No response, just silence. He stepped outside. The door shut behind him. The envelope remained on my desk, untouched, waiting. Later that night, I placed it back into the drawer, the same drawer that held Clara's favorite ring, the anniversary photos from Cape May, the mementos of a life lived in full. One more step, one more reveal. But this one wouldn't unfold in a lawyer's office, or a bank, or a diner. Number. This one would happen back where it all began, at the table, with every fork, every guest, every laugh accounted for. This time there would be no mop sink in sight. The church hall looked different under warm light. Same building, same fold-out tables, same scuffed linoleum floors Clara used to mop after Sunday potlucks. Humming hymns under her breath, apron tied loose around her waist. But that evening it wasn't just a gathering. It was a reckoning. The bulletin board by the door had a flyer pinned crookedly, edges curling. The words printed in bold ink were plain, but they carried more weight than any banner Evan ever strung. Granger Family Dinner, hosted by Molly Hartford. Simple, director, but the name said everything. Not Evan, not Cheryl, Molly. Her handwriting was even on the invitations. She hadn't sent emails. No lazy group texts blasted into phones to be ignored. She had written cards, real cards, each one tucked into a home goods envelope, sealed by hand, her pen pressing the names of relatives with deliberate strokes. A personal gesture in a family that had grown addicted to shortcuts. I got mine first. A cream card with neat black lettering, ink still smelling faintly of fresh paper. So did Evan. He didn't RSVP. But I knew he'd show. People always show up when they think something might be handed out. The tables surprised me. They weren't dressed in the usual plastic sheets that wrinkle and tear when someone leans too hard. Number Molly had laid real runners across the wood. Fabric, heavy enough to stay smooth. Silverware glinted in the glow of soft lamps borrowed from the Sunday school room. No styrofoam, no flimsy forks that snap in potato salad. And at the center of each table sat a modest arrangement. Dried magnolia leaves, brown edges kissed gold. A nod to Clara's old garden, the one she tended even when her hands had begun to ache. Molly had taste, but more than that, she had intention, and she had a plan. Voices buzzed soft as bees. Chairs scraped. People drifted into place. I saw cousins I hadn't laid eyes on since the last funeral. Neighbors who remembered when Clara used to run the bake sale booth with pies that sold out before noon. Even Pastor Watkins was there, hair silver now, glasses thicker, but still steady. Still the same man who'd stood in front of Clara and me 48 years ago to pronounce us husband and wife. At the head table, Molly stood, not tall, not commanding by stature, but the room turned to her anyway. She tapped her glass with the back of her spoon. A small sound, but it rang louder than any microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she said. Her voice wasn't forceful. It didn't need to be. Authority carried differently when it was rooted in integrity. Before dinner, I'd like to say a few words. The noise folded back. Quiet settled fast like a curtain falling. She stood straighter, leather folder clutched in her hands. Her eyes didn't dart nervously like before. They were steady now. Executor, steady. "Some of you know that after Aunt Clara passed, the trust was updated," she said. "Many of you didn't know the details. Tonight, we share them. Not for drama, but for transparency." Her gaze swept the tables, then stopped on me. "Uncle Russell gave me something most people don't even trust their lawyers with, and I've read every word. Twice." She opened the folder slowly, each motion deliberate. She reached inside and withdrew a single sheet. "This," she said, lifting it, "is the amendment. Filed April 3rd, 2021. Signed by Clara Granger. Notarized and legally binding." From the far end of the hall, I caught sight of Evan. Not by accident was he seated away from the front. His shoulders were tight, jaw clamped. Beside him, Cheryl sat stiff, lips pursed, eyes cold. They looked like figures cut out of a magazine, posed but lifeless. Molly's voice never faltered. "The clause is simple," she continued. "Anyone who publicly mocks, shames, or humiliates the primary truster, that's Russell, forfeits their right to claim inheritance." The words hit like stones dropped in water. Ripples ran through the crowd, whispers, heads leaning close. She didn't stop. That moment, as many of you witnessed, happened last Saturday, at Russell's birthday. The air thinned. A couple of guests shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at their hands. One woman, I think Evan's second cousin, always fragile with embarrassment, quietly rose and slipped out the back door, not daring to meet eyes, but Molly held steady. "The estate has now shifted. Fully. I hold executor status, and per the terms, Evan Granger and Cheryl Mayfield are removed as beneficiaries." Gasps. Real ones, the kind people can't fake. Then stillness, a heavy stillness that wrapped the hall in something almost holy. She waited a beat, then spoke again. However, Clara left one final clause, one that Russell honored. Every head turned toward me. Molly gestured gently in my direction. A temporary addendum, she explained. A redemption path, if Evan were to apologize. Sincerely, without coercion. Publicly. My eyes lifted, found his across the room. Father to son. Across years of dinners, arguments, silences, he didn't move. Cheryl leaned toward him, her lips moving fast, sharp. Poison words, no doubt. He didn't react. He sat, rigid, caught in a storm no one else could feel. I rose from my chair, slow. My knees ached, but I didn't let it show. I walked to the front, each step echoing against the hall's old walls. I took the envelope from Molly's folder, the same envelope he'd left untouched at my house days earlier. I held it high. "It's here," I said. My voice was steady. "Still sealed." The silence pressed harder. "If my son wants to change, truly change, this document gives him one last chance. Not for the money, for the memory." I set the envelope on the podium. Then I turned, faced him fully. "But he has to come get it." The room held its breath. 1 second and 2. 5. Then came the scrape of wood against tile. Louder than any sermon, his chair shoved back. Evan stood. He walked, slow, each step heavy as though the air thickened around him. Eyes flicked toward him, then away again. He stopped halfway down the aisle, and he didn't come closer. Didn't reach for the envelope. Instead, his voice cracked open. "I don't deserve it." The words tumbled out, rough, bare. Somewhere a fork clinked against a plate, sharp in the quiet. "You trusted me," he went on. His chest rose and fell fast, his voice fraying. "She trusted me, and I mocked it. Not just the party. I mean, everything." He turned his head, looked around, at cousins shifting uneasily, at aunts staring with furrowed brows, at his own children, small faces at the far corner table, watching their father unravel. "If you want to keep it, the whole estate, the house, the rest, do it. I'm not owed anything." The words hit the room like stones, then softer, almost broken. "But I hope one day I'm worth a second chance." No one clapped. No applause. Just a pause. A holy pause, like the moment after a hymn fades, but before anyone dares breathe. And then Molly moved. She stepped forward, hands calm, face unreadable. She picked up the envelope, tore it open with slow care, slid out the single-page addendum. She glanced at it once, then turned and placed it, unsigned, back in my hand. "Maybe next time, Evan," I said quietly. I tucked it away. The paper was still blank, like his choices had been, like the slate he'd refused to touch. The dinner began not long after. Plates served, chairs pulled closer, conversations rose again, but this time softer, truer. The laughter that trickled across the tables no longer stung. It was the kind that comes from release, not ridicule. And Molly, steady Molly, walked the tables with her leather folder. She didn't hand out checks. She didn't hand out property deeds or promises of shares. She handed out stories. Each guest received a small laminated card. On it, a piece of Clara's handwriting, snippets from her letters, lines about love, about perseverance, about the quiet strength of kindness, to remind them, to remind us all what legacy really means. Not wealth, not power, not entitlement, but memory. They say the measure of a man is what he leaves behind, not just in money, not just in property, but in silence, in echoes, in the stories people tell when you're no longer in the room, in the pauses they leave when your name comes up. That's how legacy works. Not with speeches, not with headlines, but with the quiet residue of memory. After the dinner, the hall emptied slowly. Chairs creaked as they folded. Table legs squealed against the scuffed floor as cousins collapsed them one by one. A few stayed behind to help Molly, bending, stacking, lifting. Others gave hugs that were quick, awkward, weighted with apologies too thin to matter. Most avoided eye contact with Evan. He didn't linger. No grand exit, no parting speech. He slipped out quietly, shoulders bent, eyes on the floor. Cheryl trailed behind, her heels clicking sharp and fast against the tile, her silence sharper still. I didn't stop them, didn't call after him. There was nothing left to say, but there was something left to do. I stayed, helped Molly carry boxes to her car parked by the cracked curb, bundles of folded napkins, pages from the guest book half filled with signatures, the leftover centerpiece candles, wax soft from the heat of the room. Candles Clara would have repurposed, I knew, turning scraps into gifts, making use of everything, never wasting. We worked in silence, the kind of silence that wasn't heavy, wasn't awkward, just steady, companionable, breath fogging in the crisp Ohio night, gravel crunching under our shoes, the faint hum of a street lamp above us, buzzing like a tired bee. When the trunk finally shut with a hollow click, Molly turned, her breath clouded in the cold. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with certainty. "You know," she said softly, "the money doesn't matter to me." I held her gaze, nodded once. "That's why you were the right choice." She hesitated then, fingers dipping into her coat pocket. The pause stretched, like she was deciding whether to cross a line. Finally, she drew out a folded document. Thick cream paper pressed with a seal I recognized before I even read the heading. Trust Discretionary Clause. Special Distribution Authority. "You're activating it?" I asked. She nodded, lips tight but sure. "For the scholarship Clara wanted," she said. "Local kids. Trade school tuition. In her name." The words landed deep. I didn't reply right away. My eyes lifted instead to the night sky above the VFW hall. A single balloon had escaped during cleanup, drifting upward, tangled for a moment between telephone wires before breaking free. A small speck rising into the darkness, heading toward starlight. "She'd be proud of you," I murmured. Molly smiled faintly. "She believed in quiet kindness," she said. "You just made sure people didn't forget it." We hugged then. No fanfare, no camera flash. Just warmth. Rare warmth. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. That was a week ago. And today I signed the last document of the estate. My name's no longer listed as executor. My home is held in trust, safe, beyond the reach of lawsuits, greedy hands, or midlife tantrums dressed up as entitlement. The accounts no longer funnel through me. Molly's name is on them now. She's the one who signs. She's the one who chooses. And she chose well. The funds are being prepared for a grant. Applications open in January. The Clara Granger Dignity Award. A scholarship not for prestige, not for ivy-covered halls, but for kids who want to work with their hands. Trade school tuition, welding, carpentry, nursing, real things that build lives. That's legacy. Clara's legacy. As for Evan, he hasn't called. Not once. But last night, a letter arrived. Slipped into the mailbox. No return address. But I didn't need one. The handwriting gave him away. Inside, an apology. Short, clumsy, but honest. The words wavered in places, scratched out and rewritten. No polished speech, just raw confession. And clipped to it, a photo. A photo from my birthday. Before the prank. Before the plastic chair. Before the ticket. It showed me standing beside the cake, leaning toward a little boy I didn't recognize, one of the guest's children. My face caught mid-laugh, the kind of laugh I hadn't seen in a mirror for years. On the back, in Evan's hand, just one line. Trying to remember the right version of you, the version I should have honored. That did something. I'm not naive. One letter doesn't undo years of distance. One photo doesn't erase silence, but it's a crack in the wall, a hairline fracture where light can seep in. I placed it carefully in the same drawer where Clara's note still rests, where her ring glimmers faintly in velvet, where the flash drive lies, its secrets already spent, and beside them, the sealed envelope with Evan's name, still unopened, still unsigned. It will stay there, waiting, for if the day comes when he reaches again. As for me, I've learned peace doesn't come from control. It doesn't come from holding power in your hand like a weapon. It comes from stillness, from knowing when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. They thought a joke would humiliate me. They thought silence meant surrender. But what they never understood is that I never needed to raise my voice to be heard. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.